Lots to dive into today. The latest on the government shutdown. Could there be some bipartisan talks going on? Brad McElhenney stops by. The latest on the effort to distribute food across the state as SNAP benefits remain suspended. And former Vice President Dick Cheney passing away. It's Metro News Talkline. We are underway.
Do not attempt to change the station. You are surrounded. We interrupt this program to bring you an emergency news bulletin. Repeat, this is an emergency bulletin. Keep your radio turned on.
From the studios of WVRC Media and the Metro News Radio and Television Network, the voice of West Virginia, comes the most powerful show in West Virginia. This is Metro News Talkline with Dave Wilson and TJ Meadows.
Check set line up link. Activated Telos telephone. Switch network control from Charleston to Morgantown.
Stand by. Q Dave and TJ. You're on. Metro News Talkline is presented by Encova Insurance, encircling you with coverage to protect what you care about most. Visit Encova.com to learn more.
Good morning. Welcome into the program. It is Metro News Talkline from the Encova Insurance Studios. Glad you are part of our morning. 800-765-TALK is the phone number. 800-765-8255. You can text the show at 304-TALK-304 as well. Appreciate you tuning in on one of our great affiliates across the state of West Virginia, or if you're watching on the Metro News TV app. Jake Link is our video producer. Ethan Collins is sitting by, our audio technician today. And, of course, TJ Meadows is in the Charleston studio. Good morning, TJ.
Morning, sir. I'm watching this New York mayoral. I tell you, man, I never would have thought a socialist had a chance of being the mayor of the financial capital of the world. That just blows my mind.
We'll get into that a little bit later on today. There are elections, not here, but there are elections in neighboring states, Ohio, Virginia, up the road in New Jersey. Of course, the New York City mayoral race. Folks are keeping an eye on. We'll get into that a little bit later on. Ryan Schmelz will join us from Capitol Hill as well. Earlier this morning, the news broke that former Vice President Dick Cheney passed away at the age of 84 due to complications with pneumonia and cardio and vascular disease. He certainly transformed the position as one of the most powerful and polarizing vice presidents in our country's history. To talk more about his career and impact, please welcome to the show Fairmont State University political science professor, friend of the show, and newlywed, Robert Bolton. Robert, good morning.
Hey, Dave. Glad to be on. Thank you for the kind words.
And first of all, congratulations, sir.
Thank you. I got married on October 18th to my beautiful bride, the former Jennifer Secure, and we spent about a week up in New England, and I'm back to the grind now. I'm actually at Fairmont State as we speak.
All right, Robert. Well, again, congratulations. Dick Cheney, powerful and polarizing. How did he change the vice presidency?
Oh, there's no question that with the possible exception of a man from the late 19th century, William McKinley's vice president, a guy named Garrett Hobart, Dick Cheney was undoubtedly the most powerful vice president in American history. When a presidential candidate is looking for a good running mate, there are really two things that they're looking for. One is someone who can be a good hatchet man, as Richard Nixon would have said, someone who is willing to go out into the muck and defend the president's policies, criticize his opponents in a way that maybe would appear too undignified for the executive office itself, and always back his position publicly. The second thing, and perhaps more importantly, although it never came into play with Dick Cheney, is would a vice president be someone who is prepared to step into the Oval Office and assume the presidency if the president is incapacitated or passes away? That's what you're looking for in any vice president. But Dick Cheney went far beyond that. He assumed a level of responsibility for managing the executive branch of government during George W. Bush's presidency that was really pretty unheard of. Impactful in regard to the United States' foreign policy and our national security programs.
Robert, again, my congratulations as well on your nuptials, sir. That's awesome. Great to hear. You think about Cheney. he was a low-key kind of guy, though. He was a low-key campaigner. He had that almost Ben Stein kind of monotone delivery. So the public-facing Cheney, maybe not necessarily what was going on behind closed doors. Seems like two different guys, maybe.
Yeah, undoubtedly. It's pretty obvious that he was a devoted family man. For example, his daughter Liz, who was a congresswoman from Wyoming, who has butted heads with President Trump on a number of occasions. He was someone who openly defended her when she earned Trump's ire. And then also his other daughter, Mary, was or is a lesbian, and she came out to him, I believe it was in the mid-'70s, late 70s, when that was still a very unusual thing. And he, to the best of my knowledge, fully supported her and basically gave up running for president in 1996 in no small part because of that. But on the public front, he was not as warm of a man. He famously once said, if you want to be liked, to go be a movie star. And he was willing to, when he made a decision, for good or ill, for correct or wrong, he would not back down from that, and he would defend that position until the end.
Robert Bolton joining us, Fairmont State University political science professor, former Vice President Dick Cheney dying at the age of 84. His family releasing a statement early this morning. He passed away last night. Robert, he really was, in a lot of ways, the ultimate number two guy because he approached the vice presidency with the idea that his agenda was the president's agenda. He wasn't looking to possibly run when George W. Bush's term was over. He was going to be the number two guy, and in a lot of ways, that is unique for that position.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think back the last time you did not have someone who was vice president run for president himself. And the last time I can think of one would probably be, it maybe was Truman. I forget if Alvin Barkley, as vice president, ran ever for president. I think he did. Yeah, I'm hard pressed. I think the last one I can think of for sure who never ran was FDR's vice president, John Nance Garner. Pretty much everyone else at least has dipped their toes into the Republican or Democrat primaries or was selected as the nominee. Cheney was never interested in that, though. He was willing to be someone who operated in the shadows and understood that true power doesn't come from public rhetoric necessarily. It doesn't come from being popularity ratings. It came from knowing how to do the administrative side of the job, how to cajole people into adopting your position, knowing where the bodies are buried, knowing how to manage the paperwork. And that was something Cheney was able to do in spades.
Cheney wanted a strong presidency. He worked for that, advocated tirelessly for that. Is it somewhat ironic that what he wanted in a strong presidency may have propelled what Donald Trump has been able to do, a president and a presidential candidate that Cheney himself did not endorse? He endorsed Harris.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Cheney was a big defender of something that's known in the legal community as the unitary executive theory. It basically says that the president, as head of the executive branch, should be suzerain of the executive branch. Pretty much any public official who's within that branch of government, he should have control of. He should be able to terminate. Cheney, I suspect, was probably not a big fan of the civil service, for example. But he also locked heads with Donald Trump. Now, some of the recent Supreme Court rulings that have come out in favor of Trump, particularly his ability to fire people who are in independent offices in government, for example, with the Federal Reserve, Cheney would probably look on those favorably, but the man himself, Donald Trump, he was not a fan of at all, in no small part because Trump heavily campaigned for the opponent of Liz Cheney in the Republican primary out in Wyoming, and basically is the decisive factor on why Liz Cheney lost her job in the House of Representatives.
Fairmont State University political science professor Robert Bolton joining us here at Metro News Talkline. We have to talk about the Iraq War, the second Iraq War. Obviously, Cheney was involved with H.W. Bush as Secretary of Defense in the first Gulf War, but the second one, Robert, a lot of the assertions that Cheney made and pushed for reasons to go into Iraq turned out to be incorrect, and he was a major proponent of our country's involvement in Iraq in the George W. Bush administration.
Yeah, people forget that Dick Cheney was George H.W., the first Bush, his Secretary of Defense during the Gulf War, and played a big role along with Colin Powell as the Joint Chief of Staff, as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in making the Gulf War such a massive success. Really, the Gulf War is the only war we've won since World War II outright. But then we got bogged down in 2003 onward until we withdrew in 2011 in the Iraq War. Cheney was a big proponent of it. A lot of people don't know that in the earliest days of the Bush administration, he was initially a little bit skeptical about the potency of Iraq's WMD program, alleged WMD program, but he quickly revised his view, and by late 2001, almost immediately after the September 11th attacks, was advocating for a potential invasion of Iraq. He probably would have did it even earlier than March of 2003 if he had had his druthers. And unfortunately, what George W. Bush, who in October of 2001 had the highest recorded popularity rating ever for a modern president, by the end of his second term was in the high 20s, low 30s, and that's no small part because of the Iraq War. Cheney's advocacy for it, and quite frankly, the policies he used to combat what he perceived as the potential of terrorist attacks, did a lot of damage to our international standing abroad in regard to enhanced interrogation, what some people would, and I think correctly, call torture. That was part of it. Also, the wiretapping program of American citizens that came out early in Bush's second term. Many of these decisions were extremely controversial. Cheney, to his credit, never apologized for his opinion, and he said, I made this decision and I'm going to stick with it. But they were unpopular, and I do think that they, in the long term, probably damaged the United States' position internationally for a number of years.
Thinking about Dick Cheney this morning, the first thing, admittedly, that popped into my mind was 9/11 and that image of him in the PEOC. And I'll defer to your recollection of history, Robert, over mine. But he, because of communications failures with W being on Air Force One, Cheney was the individual that gave the shoot down order. And then I came in, I was reading a piece, Brent Scowcroft talked about how he believed that Cheney was never the same after 9/11. Would you agree with that? And I'd like your thoughts on 9/11 as it reflects on Cheney as well.
Absolutely. It's somewhat notable that bunker that he was famously photographed in probably doesn't exist anymore after the recent demolition of the East Wing, just bringing that up for a second. But yeah, no, he was the one who gave the initial order to shoot down any carrier planes if they were unable to identify themselves and land, because at one point there appeared to be that Flight 93 was possibly going to hit either the White House or the United States Capitol. There's still some uncertainty about what its final target was, but it had the passengers not overwhelm the terrorists that probably would have ended up resulting in the plane being shot down. But yeah, in the early hours, Cheney was the one who was in control as President Bush was returning from the South. Cheney, to his credit, everyone said that he was cool and collected. After the initial report came that the Twin Towers had been struck, he almost immediately pivoted and was in control, was willing to aggregate information, was willing to lead. Had, for example, President Bush been in the White House and been killed that day, had Flight 93 hit the White House, Cheney would have been in the Oval Office, and I don't have much doubt that he would have been in control and known what he wanted to do in regard to al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan. And I do think it cemented his worldview that day we saw 3,000 people burned to death, and he was determined that was never going to happen again under his watch.
Robert, I got to admit, I doubted you during this interview because I thought Dan Quayle never ran for president. How did we forget about Dan? Well, I mean, it's easy to forget about Dan Quayle. But even Dan Quayle, for a hot minute, was seeking the Republican nomination for president in 2000.
He did run through my mind, and he didn't do very well in the primary. But I was thinking there for a second. But no, he did for a brief moment. Didn't go anywhere. But, yes, you got to have faith in me, Dave.
I do. I will never doubt you again. Robert Bolton, Fairmont State University political science professor. Thank you for the context and perspective this morning, Robert. Always appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, guys. Have a great day.
You as well. Take a break. We're just off and rolling. This is Metro News Talkline from the Encova Insurance Studios.